Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, I'm Joe Keenan, the Editor-in-Chief of Total Retail. I'm here at the ICR Conference in Orlando, and I'm joined on this episode by John Merris, who is the CEO of Solo Brands. John actually was part of the agenda earlier this morning, gave a fireside chat here at the event, and we're going to have some questions about that as well. Just learning a little bit more about the overall Solo Brands business. So thanks for joining me today, John.
Great to be with you.
So you talked a little bit about this at the fireside chat. So you went public in October 2021, yet you're continuing to experience growth and be a profitable business. So can you talk a little bit about why so many DTC brands that went public recently have really struggled to turn that profitability?
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of factors. It hasn't the last during COVID there were some moments with stimulus money and things where it was easier, but say 2022 I think rocked a lot of businesses, and I think the issue that a lot of businesses that kind of have or fall under the banner of DTC have had is that they were built on the backs of investment dollars. So from the beginning they weren't profitable, and it's really hard to turn the corner in environments like this to profitability when leading into this environment you really weren't profitable already. I think for a business like Solo, we've been profitable since we were started. We weren't started with a bunch of seed money, millions of dollars being flowed into the business, and we were just kind of spending to grow our business, but we really did it in a disciplined fashion. So it's founded with $15,000 in a garage with no expenses, and the only way we could survive is to sell the product for more than it costs us to make it.
Right.
And that's been our philosophy. So I think that there's this mindset when you think D2C, you think high growth, no profits. It's kind of where your mind goes. And I think the difference for us is when we say D2C, it's actually profitability and drive as much growth as you can while you're profitable. So it's profits first and growth second. And fortunately, when you do that right, you actually have dollars to invest in growth. And so I think what's different for us is rather than rely on other people to put dollars into our business, we've been able to self-fulfill our prophecy by generating cash ourselves and then reinvest in the business.
And maybe I should just take a step back and just have you tell us a little bit about that origin story and explain the brand for those that aren't familiar with Solo Brands. Just kind of give an overview. I know there's a few brands, you've made some acquisitions, so tell us a little bit about the organization as a whole.
Yeah, that's great. So the first brand, the kind of foundational brand inside of Solo Brands is Solo Stove. We manufacture backyard and kind of camping, tailgating, wood burning fire pits that burn nearly smokeless. So imagine being able to sit around a fire pit and not play musical chairs and have your eyes burning and your hair smelling like smoke and everything else. So that's really Solo Stove. We've expanded that brand from an innovation standpoint to a variety of product categories. We were just talking about our pie pizza oven, the ability to cook restaurant quality pies in your backyard, pizzas, and then patio heaters and patio furniture. So really the kind of this expansion to outdoor living, outdoor experiential is really big for Solo Stove. In 2021, we made our first acquisition of a company called Oru Kayak, which is an origami kayak. It folds to the size of a briefcase. It weighs 20 pounds, super portable, makes kayaking more accessible to its customers. And then we bought a paddleboard business and surf company called Isle Paddleboards out of San Diego, which has been fantastic. Our acquisition spree kind of culminated with the purchase of a company called Chubbies. It's men's swimwear and apparel, super fun brand. A lot of people ask okay, Solo Stove, outdoor fire pits, we kind of understand the kayaks, we kind of understand the paddle boards, but what about Chubbies and how did that funnel in? We've been talking about direct to consumer. When we talk about direct to consumer, we're really talking about the relationship. We're not talking about the channel. I think a lot of people, when they hear direct to consumer, immediately go, oh, okay, so we're talking about an e-commerce business. But for us, e-commerce is an element of it, but it's really about that direct connection to the customer. And what drove the acquisitions for us, including for Chubbies, is that these were all brands that had really strong connections to their customers. Their customers were loyal, passionate followers, and we saw an opportunity to potentially cross-pollinate those customer bases for growth.
And I want to bring that up, and you talk about all these being brands that you've acquired, all being direct-to-consumer brands first. So thinking about that, and you talked about the customer, those loyal customer bases that existed when you brought them into the fold. Tell us, and you talked about this in your fireside chat, it's less about D2C and more about the customer relationship. So what do you mean by that, and why I do believe kind of that D2C is putting the loyal customer base first?
Yeah, in a world where you read the headlines and you ask yourself, like, why do D2C companies, why are they really labeled as unprofitable or as unable to make money? And it all comes down to customer acquisition costs. What their product costs them to make and it costs them to acquire the customer is more than what they're actually selling the product for. I mean, that's really the disconnect. And so if you want to drive customer acquisition costs down, which ultimately means you want to get profitable, which hopefully everyone wants to, the way that you should think about that is you've got to deliver value to the consumer. Well, if you don't have a relationship to the consumer or with the consumer, then how can you know what they value? And that's been big for us. We want to be connected to the consumer. We want to have a relationship with them. We want to be able to converse with them. We talk to them all the time. We survey our customers and ask them how we're doing on the existing products. What about the value, the price that they paid versus the value they're getting out of the product? What about products that we haven't launched that they wish that we would, and what price point would they be willing to pay for those products? This interaction with the customer has been pivotal for us as we think about innovation, as we think about growth, and all the things and the initiatives that we're trying to drive within the business. So it's exactly what you said. When I say DTC, I'm not thinking about what channel we're selling in. When I say DTC, I'm talking about the relationship with the customer, and then the channel we figure out, right? So, okay, if it's first about the relationship with the customer, whether we're selling into a retailer or whether we're selling into them on our website, the question is how do we bring them full circle back to interacting with our brand directly?
And we're going to get into retail in a second, as I know it's a potential growth opportunity for solo brands. But sticking to the D2C theme for a second, tell us a little bit about why, if you believe done right, you outlined it at kind of the start. Most people think D2C is challenged to be profitable because of acquisition and all the costs involved. So how can solo brands, your viewpoint in terms of being a true D2C company, but also layering in potential wholesale opportunities and looking ahead to growth?
Yeah, if you look back at or start with customer acquisition costs, there's a lot of tactics, right? I mean, that you can deploy in order to, drive customer acquisition costs down or increase your sell price and ultimately still generate profits. And one of them, even before I get into wholesale and retail relationships, that comes to mind for me is referral business. And again, back to the relationship with the customer. When you're driving really strong loyalty with your consumers by listening to them, reacting to them, responding to them, and delivering a great customer experience, you tend to want to share with your friends and family members the products that you love, right? You don't ask the brand for compensation for doing that. You just do it in exchange for a great experience. And that's been a big unlock for us. We focused on customer experience in this relationship with the customer. And what that's led to is a lot of loyalty from our customers who tell their friends and family about our brand. And when their friend and family member comes to our site and purchases our product or goes into a store and buys the product, we didn't have to pay or spend advertising dollars to acquire that customer. And so when you blend that together with the customers we did have to pay for, ultimately you're driving your customer acquisition costs down. And so, again, to now lean into the question around retail and wholesale and how we're thinking about that as an opportunity for us, there's a whole world of eyeballs out there that we're not attracting online just through e-commerce that retailers have gotten very good at and already have loyal audiences with, that they can bring those eyeballs to our products on our behalf. And ultimately, when they do that, it lowers our customer acquisition costs via the channel by partnering with the right retailer. So we've been selective with who we've allowed to carry our products, who we wanted to align our brand with. But the retailers that we have partnered with, we're excited about. They're bringing us new sets of eyeballs. It's additive to the reach and the exposure that we already have, and that's been really effective for us.
You mentioned being very selective about the retail partners that you've worked with, and you gave a great example today in terms of how you're trying to bring that customer relationship back to solo brands. They may buy from a retail partner. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you're doing that? Because when people think about wholesale, they're thinking about, okay, they're losing that relationship with the customer. They're not collecting the data. They don't know who bought, why they bought, when they bought. So talk a little bit about how you're trying to overcome that hurdle, still maintain the customer relationship in a wholesale, in a relationship that starts through a wholesale purchase.
Yeah, it's a great question. And with a ticker like DTC, you can imagine the internal conflict that we have as we start selling to retailers. And they're going, wait, but hold on this ticker. But the truth is that if you approach the relationship from the get-go with, again, customer relationship in mind, it actually isn't that complicated. It starts for us with the SKU mix. So what products are we actually putting into our retail partnerships? Of course, you have to offer great products, right? Retailers want the best products, the products that consumers want to purchase. And so we first start with, okay, what's attractive to our retail partner and that consumers are really going to be excited about being able to touch and feel and walk out with off the shelf. But we're also careful in that SKU mix to try to find products that we know customers are likely to want to come back for an add-on purchase, an additional accessory, some sort of item that would enhance the experience with the product they're buying in store. And so we're focused on that. And then ultimately, if we can get an insert or some sort of offer inside of the box in the retailer and get them to come back to our store to buy an accessory, buy a stand for the fire pit or a lid for the fire pit, we can still drive a one-to-one connection with the customer, different than if we were to just carry all the SKUs in the retailer, set it up so that the consumer never needed to interact with the brand and really lose touch with the consumer. That's really what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah, and that I guess leads into my next question in terms of the profitability of the customer acquired directly versus one that you're acquiring through a wholesale channel. Can you talk a little bit about that potential gap, if there is one, and if there is a gap, how do you offset those margin that you're giving up on wholesale as you further go into that area of the business?
Yeah, so you lose gross margin when you sell to wholesale, right? Because you're selling the product for a lower price. Believe it or not, in our model, the contribution margin, or ultimately the profit on the sale, actually ends up being very equitable between our e-commerce customer or our direct sale versus our sale that goes through wholesale. And the reason being is that generally we offer a free shipping option to our consumers online. So we've got to ship the product to the customer, and there's a cost associated with that. There's also a cost associated with the marketing to acquire that customer. With wholesale retail, the customer acquisition cost is really burdened by the retailer, right, who has the brick and mortar store, the place for the consumer to come, and they cover the shipping, right, of the product to their stores. And so our gross margin is slightly lower with wholesale retail, but when you flow through down to profitability, you actually have an equitable scenario. So for us, and again, it's a great situation for our retail partners as well. We don't have any more incentive from a profitability standpoint to sell to a consumer directly on our site or in their store, as long as we can still have a relationship with the customer, which is what we're focused on. So from a dollars and cents standpoint or profitability standpoint, we really could be indifferent about which channel we're selling in.
Yeah. When you think about the lifetime value of your customer too, as you've added these new brands to the fold, maybe some customers that were initially acquired through the Solo Stove, do you feel like there's overlap? Have you seen overlap? How do you try to sell them into these additional brands? If you are, maybe it doesn't make sense. You try to silo things. What's your strategy there?
Yes, up to now the brands have been pretty siloed, but in 2022 we've been talking throughout the year about an effort last year to really invest in the data work, the data infrastructure, and the CDP within the business, so that we can start looking at the customers across brands and looking for any sort of similarities and ties and opportunities to cross-sell those customers. Today, roughly 2% or so of our businesses or of our customers have shopped from more than one of the brands. And we'd love to see that grow to 10, 15, 20% over time. We're just in the early stages of the investments and the work into the data to take advantage of that opportunity.
And it could be an awareness issue too, right? Do they even know that the brands are connected?
Right. A lot of them don't. We've made subtle announcements here and there, but have been careful and cautious not to kind of, shove any one brand down a consumer's throat, in terms of, making them feel smothered or overselling to them. So we're careful about it. But yes, there's definitely an awareness component. And in fact, all the time I'll be talking to somebody and they'll go, what? You guys own Chubbies, or you guys own Solo Stove, or you guys own Oru or IO. So it's kind of a cool moment when the aha lights go on, to somebody and they already love one brand and they love a different brand and they realize that those two brands are actually under one umbrella.
As you think about 2023, growth opportunities, what do you foresee? I mean, we've talked a little bit about wholesale. Is potential future acquisitions in the mix? Expansion of product categories. Where are the growth opportunities that you're targeting?
Yeah, there's probably four that I can mention here that we're all pretty excited about. I think the first one is new product innovation. In 2022, we rolled out more innovation than we ever have in a given year. 23 looks even better and potentially more robust than 22, so we're super excited about that opportunity. International continues to be a big opportunity for us. We're continuing to invest in going deeper in the markets that we've launched. So we're live with our own sites and fulfillment centers in Canada and Europe. We launched Australia earlier this year, which is an exciting one for us, and we're going to continue to invest in those markets and go deeper. The third one is what we were talking about, which is the data work that we're doing in terms of being able to cross-market customers, and we think that that's a big growth driver for us. And then lastly, as you were mentioning and leaning into throughout the conversation, is the wholesale retail partnerships and the expansion opportunity that we have there. We're super early in our story across really all of our brands when it comes to wholesale retail, and we're excited to be able to lean into some of the partnerships. Chubbies, is from a retail perspective, retail expansion standpoint, one of the biggest success stories that we've seen over the last several months with our Dick's Sporting Goods partnership, going from about 100 stores or so to almost all doors into 23. So big opportunities kind of across the board, both to go deeper and wider in our wholesale retail partnerships.
I want to follow up on point 3 and then some of that data integration work. From a talent perspective, as you think about investments too, do you have that in-house? Do you look to work with outside partners there? What are your plans for that?
Yeah, it's our model has always been to do things as efficiently as possible, and what that has generally looked like for us is that we use outside help until we're paying that outside help more than it would cost us to hire an internal resource. And that's been our model, and we've replicated that over and over and over again. So today, based on our size and scale, most of our talent is in-house. We do very little work with outside agencies. It's allowed us more control. We've been able to manage costs better and been able to really build best in class when it comes to, again, the digital capabilities and running all of our marketing and our data platform.
Coming out of the holiday season, and I don't know that any of your brands would be particularly seasonal. Maybe they are gifting brands, maybe the Chubbies brand. But just your overall view of the consumer, what you saw out of the consumer in Q4 and what that potentially means for the overall health of the consumer in Q1 here and then moving deeper into 2023.
Yeah, I think in 2022 we saw the consumer return to pre-pandemic holiday shopping behavior. So, in 2020 and 2021, consumers accelerated their shopping a little bit. They were shopping earlier. There were supply chain challenges. In 2022, you saw the consumer holding on a little bit longer, waiting for the best deal, really wanting to get to that week of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and take advantage of the best opportunities to buy for the lowest price, which is what it looked like in 2019 and all the years prior, for as long as we've been around. And so I think in some regards that's a very good thing, right? right? I think it tells us that the consumer is somewhat normalizing in their behavior. We're not going to see the sporadic, unpredictable volatility that we've seen from consumers over 20 and 21. Even though we were all excited when they got free stimulus dollars and they were spending them like crazy, it was still volatile. It was unpredictable. That's why we had supply chain challenges in the first place. So I like the predictability that the consumer is showing to us. There's signs that they're getting back to more normal behaviors, which means, as we watch the ebbs and flows of the economy, of savings in their bank accounts, of interest rates and things, we should be able to predict a little bit better what consumers are going to do. Obviously, the downside to what we're seeing in the consumer is that inflation is at all-time highs. Savings has been depleted over pretty much the last 6 to 8 months. Interest rates are also pretty high. And so there's likely some headwinds ahead from a macroeconomic condition standpoint. But again, you mix that in with the predictability that we're going to get out of this environment from the consumer, different than the last couple of years, and it'll be a mixed bag for sure.
And how about from an inventory position as you begin this new year? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think for us, and we've talked about this, there were in other brands, frankly, there's just a lot of investment in 21 and 22 coming out of 2020 when everybody's just like, whoa, what just happened? Supply chain challenges, freight costs were going up. And then we got ourselves into a position where we saw the softening happen in 22 and everybody had all this inventory. There were a lot of fears going into Q4 that brands were going to be so over inventory that promotions were going to go through the roof and gross margins were going to, get destroyed. And there's been some of that. I don't think it's been as severe probably as maybe, we thought that it was going to be, which I think is a good thing. And overall, I think from the reports that we've read around, credit card spending and things like that around Cyber Monday and Black Friday, the consumer did seem to show up for the holiday sales. And I think for that reason, I feel good about overall the state of inventory across most brands. For us in particular, we feel good about the position we're in rolling into 23 and believe that, by the back half of 23, we will have made a serious dent on getting our inventory back to a normalized level.
When I think about, in particular, your Solo Stove brand, I would imagine, and you could tell me if I'm right or wrong, that the growth in that brand really, the pandemic probably accelerated that as people were spending a lot more time outdoors, new customers coming into the fold. Now that we're moving out of the pandemic, and you try to hold and retain on those customers. Tell us a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about acquisition, but retention, and it doesn't have to be specific to the Solo Stove brand, but I thought that might be an interesting angle for you to touch on.
Yeah, it's a great one. Retention has been so important to us, and our ability to attract customers and getting them to come back. And that new product innovation I was talking about earlier has been such a critical component for us in getting customers to reopen their wallets to us and say, "Hey, I've got this fire pit that seemingly is durable. It's going to last a while. What else? What else can I add to that?" And so, we spent a lot of time during the pandemic innovating and launching new products, and that's been a big driver for us. And, I know it's not retention, but back to your comment about acquisition and acquiring the acquisition of new customers. During the pandemic, while we did get the lift you're talking about as people were at home more and investing into outdoor activities, we saw this lift in demand from customers, which was fantastic. But where we actually saw a drop was in our referral rates. See, we have a really high referral rate at Solo Stove, so to use that as the example, and we went from 45 to 50% referral rates at the peak prior to the pandemic, all the way down to 18 to 20% referral rates, which meant just a lot less people were sitting around their fire pits with friends and family members, and so we weren't getting as many of the referrals that we would normally get whenever you go to your friend's house and you're like, "Man, this is the coolest thing, a smokeless fire pit. I got to go get one of those too." And so what we theorized and has come to fruition, and we saw it in 2022 and are excited for 23, is that now as we're in a post-COVID world and things are opening back up and families are gathering again, we have this big install base of customers that hadn't yet referred the people in their circle because they hadn't gotten together with them yet. And we're starting to see that, and ultimately when that happens, referral rate goes back up, which is exactly what we've seen. So 45 to 50% pre-pandemic, dips to a low of about 18%, and then now is back up to 45 to 50%. And so we're seeing that referral business come back through, which ultimately lowers our customer acquisition cost and really helps us to drive growth in a post-COVID environment, or an environment where we're having to lap the nice demand that we saw through COVID. And so that's how we're still able, as we talked about in our Q3 earnings call, still deliver significant double-digit growth, even organically, in this type of environment.
And I think you gave a great example during the fireside chat today in terms of growing that lifetime spend as well with and I believe it was Costco was the example that you gave. If they're buying one of the Solo stoves, the fire pit, you're then including a coupon to drive them back to get an accessory, to get a cover for that fire pit, or so you're then extending that relationship and potentially getting another sale out of that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the goal for us is to continue to add value to our customers' lives. We say at Solo, good moments and lasting memories. My job is basically help people put smiles on their faces. And so if we can come out with innovation that helps customers do that more, that's going to be a win for us and ultimately a win for the customer. And so it's really a win-win scenario, and anything that we can do to give customers a reason to be circling back with us, to continuing to buy products from us, infiltrate other areas of their lives. We talked about the pie pizza oven earlier. That's a completely different category to the fire pit. The patio heater, extending again their outdoor living space and allowing them to spend more time outdoors for longer. Anything like that we're able to do is an excuse for the customer to come back and give us dollars, and then ultimately take those dollars and then for us roll them into that LTV to CAC ratio, which is the end goal, right? Raising LTV because your customer acquisition costs ultimately stayed roughly the same.
Well, great. I want to take the opportunity to thank John Merris, the CEO of Solo Brands, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Talks here at ICR. Thanks, John.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. It was great being with you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.